Okay, welcome to another Northern Monkeys video. This time we're looking at Space Marine Terminators. In Pariah Nexus they got a dropping point, which is really good. They're now down to the lowest they've maybe ever been. And I just thought it's a good time to reassess this unit that a lot of people have in Leviathan and a lot of people want to use because they're so cool. So let's talk about the base stats for this unit. What do you get? So for 170 points for 5 or 340 for 10, you get very reasonable stats lines these days. So they're only movement 5, which is a bit of a downside. However, toughness 5, it's good. It's just like there's a lot of weapons at that break point where they just kind of miss out. Like bolt guns wound you on 5s, that's a big decrease. There's less chip shots getting through, so that's really good. Obviously, the 2 up save and 3 wounds gives them they are a lot more durable than your standard marine body. 2 damage weapons don't take them out, and they generally just struggle to like bring this unit down with like any ease. And don't forget as well, they have a 4+ invuln, so even really high AP can't like cripple their durability totally. Mortal wounds are a different thing, but I mean everyone's vulnerable to mortal wounds. So yeah, I think overall, even with OC1, this is a good solid stat line for only 170 points now. It's really worth looking at. Now, their slowness is also really compensated for via a few of their abilities that we'll talk about later. Now, unfortunately, basic Space Marines, we can't take a guy with such a awesome loadout as this fancy Space Wolf here, but you do still have access to all these options. Personally, I think you can kit the unit out to do whatever you want. The Sergeant no longer has to have the rubbish power sword, which, while it's a shame, it is better for the unit in game. Even though that iconic bit of like modeling that everyone's had since like Black Reach, when that little stubby Terminators had that power sword sergeant who was just worse than the rest of the squad. Now you can have a bunch of different weaponry. It's all detailed in the previous slide. The assault cannon, I think it's what everyone takes just because that's what the new Leviathan Terminators came out with. However, personally, I think it is considerably worse since you either swap your Stormbolter for an assault cannon or you just keep your Stormbolter and also get a double missile launcher, which hits on 3s. It's just fantastic for the Terminators, like having that reach. And don't forget, if you get a 10-man squad, you can have 2 of these missile launchers in your squad. So all of a sudden, kicking out 4 crack missiles or 4d6 with blast worth of shots, really nice. And your opponent is just going to sort of have to weather that since these guys are left like buried behind another like 15 wounds worth of T5 2-up save bodies. So yeah, pretty good stuff on the equipment wise. Now, chain fists, I think you can take these guys if you're in like a vehicle heavy meta. They'll do you well. However, you sort of always need them to be going into the Oath of Moment target in order to get the like value out of those chain fists because they do hit on 4s, unfortunately. However, that's kind of compensated for by their abilities, which we can talk about now. So the first ability, Fury of the First. Basically, whenever you attack your Oath of Moment target, you add 1 to the hit roll. I've noticed they've kind of tried to do this with a load of different, like, first company units. The Stern Guard, I believe, reroll wound rolls of 1 when they shoot the Oath unit. I don't think Vanguard veterans get anything, but those are kind of forgotten this edition by Games Workshop. I think they don't want them to exist until they come out in the 11th Ed starter set, but whatever. Yeah, so the Oath of Moment target, if you shoot it with your Terminators, you add 1 to your hit roll. Now, I think this is pretty good. It takes basically all of your attacks with your Power Fists and Stormbolters into hitting on 2s, which with the reroll as well, it basically guarantees that like everything's going to hit. And it also benefits those Chain Fists that you can take, because it gets them down to hitting on 3s, which is really good. They generally, I found getting good mileage out of this unit. It's kind of like nuke stuff. Just the sheer volume of shots they kick out. It's 10 bolt gun shots. You got missiles going as well as that. It's just really nice. And all of it hitting on 2s. You can't ask for much better than that. Unfortunately, the shooting, I would say, is one of their kind of downsides with these guys. Is the shooting is a lot of outside of the 2 crack missiles, which are a little swingy, the shooting is a little like sort of plink shots. It's just a high volume of bolter shots, so you'll get great value out of it into like Tyranids if they have swarms of guys running around. But generally, if your opponent's like spamming vehicles or is a lot of Marines or a lot of stuff like Grey Knights with 2-up saves, you're generally not going to get much value out of them. But in those cases, if it's like Marines with 2-up saves, well, you've got the Power Fists for that, which are pretty decent all round, sort of for hitting. They hit on 3s, they have 3 attacks each on the Terminators. And if they're hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, it's a lot for your opponent to have to deal with. And don't forget, there's always great stratagems like Honor the Chapter in Gladius, where you'll get +1 to wound on the charge and an extra AP. All of a sudden, those power fists are very dangerous, even to vehicles, which is kind of why I like them over the Chain Fists, apart from just not having Terminators modelled with Chain Fists. But yeah, pretty good. Now, the teleport homer ability. So this goes hand in hand with the kind of other data sheet ability, which is they have deep strike. It's a fairly common rule. It lets them come in from strategic reserves anywhere on the board instead of just near the edge of the battlefield. So it's a really good ability, really strong. You see so many units with it these days, and the 3-inch deep strikes and all these little rules that they get. However, Terminators, they just have their normal deep strike. But they do get the teleport homer ability, which is a little piece of war gear you get with them, where essentially at the start of the battle, which is very key, you can place this token down anywhere that's not in your opponent's deployment zone. And basically, if any Terminator model, when you use the rapid ingress stratagem, which lets you come in from deep strike reserves at the end of your opponent's movement phase, generally from turn 2 onwards, you get to come in for free. So you don't need to use a command point for it, and you get to just arrive from teleport reserve as long as you're within 3 of this token. Now, I think this is the most nuanced and sort of tricky part of the Terminator unit to use. There's a lot to it. So first off, rapid ingress is absolutely amazing, like probably one of the best stratagems in the entire game. And if you use it right, it can win you the game. Basically, because they get to come down on your opponent's turn, and all of a sudden they're moving and charging and shooting on your turn, which basically can mean you have almost guaranteed charges. It'll be a 4-inch charge if you do come down within 9 of an enemy model, which is really good, but you don't have to use it just for that. Because one thing also you can do with rapid ingress is use it to get primary points that your opponent wasn't necessarily sort of counting on you having. So if you could put this teleport homer down, say like behind some ruins but near enough to a objective, you can use it to snag stuff like that. And I believe it's very much worth talking about this start of the battle. That's when you place it. Now, I was looking through like what is the start of the battle exactly? Like, is it deployment? Is it after deployment? And as far as I can tell from my reading, and I'd really love to someone to sort of find me a quote on this, maybe it's buried somewhere in all those rules commentaries that they love to do these days that are very, very helpful. Everyone loves those. The start of the battle seems to be after you've decided who's going first. So you roll off whichever player's going first, and then you place the Homer token down. That seems really, really good because you know basically how far your opponent's going to be able to move, especially if you're going first as well. Sort of your opponent won't get to bring in their deep strikers before you've had a chance to do. So yeah, it could be really, really good. And like I said, you can snag an objective, you can threaten a flank, and of course you can always play mind games with your opponent, like put it down in a place where they like, oh, I need to stop, I can't let Terminators arrive there, so they stick a unit on that objective or that area, just trying to stop you from rapid ingressing there, and then just rapid ingress them somewhere else. It is only a command point at the end of the day, so I think the token's really fun and really sort of an interesting part of the Terminator's kit. And getting the most out of it has a lot of different dimensions to it. So talking about their leaders now, I think probably my favourite pick for them is the Captain in Terminator armor. He's the most expensive leader you can buy for them out of the basic heroes. It's worth shouting out that I think Captain Lysander is actually quite decent for his points. He's a little more expensive than the standard Captain, but he gives you a bunch of bonuses for your Terminators, and he himself like hits like a train and tanks like a train. I don't know. Trains seem pretty tough to me. I would like to try and dismantle one. So yeah, Captain Lysander I think is worth playing around with, but I don't think a lot of people are wanting to take Imperial Fists these days. Now, the Terminator Captain though, he gives you a free stratagem, or well, reduces a stratagem by a point nowadays, and he also lets you reroll charges for the unit. The reroll charges is great. It's just basically might save you a command point, like make you make a long bomb charge that you might not normally do. And these guys are coming out of Deep Strike, so if you haven't been able to set up that rapid ingress, then this is cool. It's worth noting that as per those little rules updates, you can use the captain's free stratagem ability while he's in reserve. So this guy can give you a rapid ingress for free, even not on your teleport homer. So you can double up there. It's really good. And like I said, a lot of stratagems are good for using on the Terminators. Armor of Contempt's a really good one with that 2-up save. They can kind of be immune to small arms fire, even if it's got, even stuff that's like AP2. If you're in cover and you've got Armor of Contempt, you're sticking on your 2-up saves, you're not going anywhere against that. So it can let you shrug off the like anti-tank fire that your opponent will have to direct these guys away. So yeah, the captain's a really good pick. He fights pretty well. He just generally makes the unit better. He's like, as a captain should be, he's the all-rounder. The Ancient in Terminator armor, only 75 points, so he's a little cheaper, but he's about the same price as most of the Terminator characters. And while he's very, very cool, because he has that banner, it's a very classic part of being a Space Marine, is waving a banner about. Rest in peace, Dawn of War 1 Trailer Sergeant. you you do kind of have a thing with him of like, he gives you +1 to hit if you're below starting strength, +1 to wound if you're below half strength, which I think in a big 10-man blob of Terminators, like giving them all an extra point of OC as well, that's his last ability. It's quite cool. And he also gets a crazy amount of war gear on the Ancient, like he can be swinging around a Thunderhammer and a Power Fist and stuff while still having his banner somehow. So I don't think he's necessarily bad, but at this point, if you're putting the Ancient in, you're kind of making the squad insanely costly. So yeah, it's a tricky one, whether to take the Ancient or not, because he can go in addition to another character. So if you've got the points spare, if you've got 75 points hanging around, I think the Ancient's worth it. And he could also take an enhancement and be placed in alongside Lysander, who can't usually take enhancements. So I think honestly, might be better off with Assault Terminators, but a 10-man squad of Terminators led by Lysander with the Ancient, and the Ancient has that Shadow Spear enhancement for the Blade Driven Deep. Just the 10-man squad infiltrating up the board. That would be very funny. So yeah, maybe that's why the Ancient's worth it. Now, the Librarian, he's kind of my favourite little pick, just because I think that model that came out in Leviathan is very, very cool. He looks very striking, like this guy in blue leading your Terminators. So, yeah, I like the Librarian. The main benefit he does is that he gives you sustained hits. He does also give you a feel no pain versus psychic attacks, which like might be good in certain scenarios against like Thousand Suns. However, it doesn't really count things like mortal wounds as psychic attacks in a lot of cases. But he adds his own decent enough melee. It's probably the worst out of all the different characters. But he does also have a decent psychic attack. It's just the standard D6 shots, and you can go hazardous to get extra AP and damage on it. So yeah, he's okay in terms of his output, but giving the squad sustained hits, I really, really like, because the sort of benefit of it is that you can get the sustained hits on your missiles, you're firing tons of bolter shots that are all hitting on 2s with sustained into your oath target. Like, you can generally just like fish for 6s to try and like land like 3 crack missile shots out of 2, which would be really, really good. And he also gives you that in melee. That's kind of his benefit. So all those power fist attack with sustained hits is really, really good. And again, it's part of that thing of just upping this squad's durability, because they basically just get that whole, like, you get going in with sustained hits, with lance, whatever you can give them. All of a sudden they are punching vehicles to death. They are sort of, ripping through whole squads of Space Marines that they might not necessarily have any business doing. So yeah, I really like the Librarian as kind of a little side pick. I don't necessarily know how competitive it is, because like adding 75 points onto the squad, like, yeah, taking characters in Terminators is a strange prospect. And the Chaplain is kind of a doubling up of this. Now he's pretty tough because he can take a relic shield and have extra wounds. And he does give them that permanent +1 to wounded melee buff. Lets those fists like tear through bigger things a lot more easily. You know, you can even be wounding like Gravis on 2s, wounding really tough vehicles like Land Raiders on 4s. You know, it's not a bad bonus. However, that's kind of the only bonus he does. He suffers from the Crozius only being AP 1, which isn't the best. And I think he can unbattle shock a unit, but the way that it is worded is really bad. If you don't know, Chaplain's battle shock happen at the end of a phase, which means that you can like miss scoring on primary because he can't unbattle shock his unit. So I don't love the Chaplain as much as I love the Librarian as kind of a side pick, but still, he's not. I don't think you're throwing the game by including him. So in this last section here, I just kind of want to talk about what's actually worked for me on the tabletop, and kind of just some practical sort of stuff that I've noticed. I think with the points decrease, only 170 for 5 Terminators is very, very good. I think they're finally worth their price. However, I think they are almost best just left there. Now, I've run a captain as like a solo tech piece. There's another video you can find on our channel sort of talking about that, and that's surprisingly good, especially if you don't have assault intercessors with jump packs. But yeah, the 5-man squad just sort of running around on their own is quite effective really, and it generally just it's sort of a bully unit. Now, I gotta say that the deep strike ability, unless you're playing against a super aggressive enemy like World Eaters or Vanguard Nids, like someone who's just going to be in your lines, like potentially turn 1, I've always found it's best to put these guys in deep strike. And now that they're a little less expensive, it feels like less bad to have such a big squad waiting for a turn or two to finally act. Obviously, if you need them, you need them, so you've got to make that decision like on a game by game basis. But against a lot of opponents, I like put them in strategic reserve, which lets them use their deep strike. And then the rapid ingress is really the best part of their kit. So if you remember to use that teleport homer or use the teleport homer as bait, I think that's like a really good way of doing it. And just because this is a unit that will clear your opponent's like home objective, like say they've got like a vehicle back there and a squad of infantry holding their home objective. If this squad arrives from rapid ingress and then on your turn moves out, shoots the vehicle with a couple of crack missiles, hoses down the infantry with all their bolter shots, because like I mean even a 5-man squad can have 20 shots. It's pretty good. It'll kill like a squad of guardsmen on a good day, and then charge into the vehicle and finish it off. You'll just claim your opponent's home objective, and with a 170 point unit, that's pretty good. And once you've got it, they're going to have to seriously turn around and figure out a way to shift you off it, because like this squad is not insignificant to kill. Between the 4-up invuln, it's always a coin flip about whether they're going to die, and if you're just shooting like even AP2 stuff at them, like in shooting, it's very easy for them to have a 2-up save against that. Now, I think that's definitely worth like playing around with the unit, trying to figure out the best way to use that teleport homer and the rapid ingress. I think on a 5-man squad, characters are all generally fairly like frivolous. Like you're adding a lot of value like to this squad in terms of like the points you're paying for them. You suddenly go from like 170. If you run it into a captain, all of a sudden it's like 265. It's just a massive increase. Like all of a sudden you're going from talking about a squad that's relatively cheap to a squad that's the same cost as like a Land Raider Redeemer. And, you know, maybe that's just not what you want to be doing. But I think in a 10-man squad, maybe this would be, if I get some more Terminators, this is something I'd definitely experiment with. I think maybe running them with like Lysander, who gives them the -1 to wound. That might be really good. Imperial Fists have couple of decent characters, so maybe it is worth going for that. But yeah, big 10-man squad. I feel like at that point you're paying like 400 points for a 10-man squad with like a captain and an ancient or something. It might be a bit silly, but still it'd be cool. But yeah, personally, what I've had success with is running little 5-man squads that rapid ingress and deal with enemy chaff and fight enemy elites. It's a nice combo, but it requires good positioning and good kind of general knowledge of the matchups to use properly. And I'd say as a tip, don't expect these guys to like just kill anything. Like if you can't fight a Redemptor Dreadnought with these guys, -1 damage really hurts them. You can't like fight big tanks and expect them to get like really good results. I remember early in the edition, like I think it was like 9th edition lag, where I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll charge my Terminators into that like Chimera, they'll deal with it, and it's like, oh, I'm stuck in there with the Chimera. Yeah, really can be quite annoying. Um, so yeah, you need to use things like the Honor the Chapter stratagem, stuff like that, in order for them to deal with those really heavy units. And obviously the Oath of Moment to make them hit on 2s, re-rolling. They're a unit that it's worth using that Oath for, especially in combat where they have all those power fists. So yeah, those are a few things to watch out for. Definitely a good unit though, especially at the new points cost. Alright guys, video went a bit longer than I thought it would, but yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. If you like this style of content, it's probably the easiest one for me to make. So yeah, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.